Hi, welcome back to the What We Do in the Shadows podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing episodes 7 through 9 of season 3, entitled The Siren, The Wellness Center, and A Farewell. And what are your overall thoughts, Dan? Real fast.
Again, 3 really good episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have very many issues with any of these episodes. Generally speaking, these episodes were not only really funny, but also carried some emotion with them. They had a lot of the ongoing emotion of what's been happening this season. A lot of Nandor being depressed and feeling lonely. A lot of Guillermo wanting more connection with Nandor. A lot of Nadia hyper angry, hyper sad because of the Vampire Council stuff. And then Laszlo and Colin just doing their Laszlo and Colin stuff. So I really like these 3 episodes. Again, so far, this season has been absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. These are 3 really good episodes, character driven, and the last one is just really, really great. But before we get to the last one, we'll talk about the Siren, which the description of the Siren is that 2 travelers are shipwrecked and a doll runs away from home. Obviously, the 2 shipwrecked travelers are Colin and Laszlo, and they acquired their ship in a really funny way. They just crash a frat bro party and then kill one person, and everyone else runs away. And then a doll runs away from home. Not just doll, who we figured out this episode never had a name to begin with. We just called her doll. Is running away. Feels like she's not appreciated. What did you think of the Siren, Dan?
I'm in the same camp as you. I think that of the 3 episodes, it would be on the bottom. But again, bottom of these 3 episodes is still high tier, What We Do in the Shadows. The one thing I would say is it feels so similar to the previous episode 6, just because in that episode, they are chasing after something very similar in the way that they were built. It's a chase. You're chasing after something. So I thought that was sort of strange that they kind of went back to that A plot. Let's start with the real B plot, though, which is the Colin and Laszlo bit. I was watching it. I was like, this is just a great sitcom B plot. This is just this is an episode that we'll probably take for granted because of how great the rest of the season is. But it's just a silly shipwreck episode for Colin and Laszlo. All of that was really funny. And Laszlo explaining stuff. And then I'll let you pick up because I'm rambling, but Laszlo explaining stuff, Laszlo doing exposition is maybe one of my favorite top 5 things about this show. Whenever Laszlo's here's what we're doing in this B plot, it's always funny.
Yes.
Because he always delivers it with such, Matt Berry that is, he always delivers it with in such an unnatural way. He has a very strange delivery pattern. I can't even quite explain it. It's he's not hitting the emphasis on the words that most people would hit the emphasis on.
I'd love to talk about this because I'm a huge Matt Berry fan. Circa COVID, to be fair. I had no clue who Matt Berry was, and then I watched all of Matt Berry's stuff really fast, particularly Toast of London. I really like that show. I know it's not great, but I love it. And it comes down to Matt Berry's performance in that. You said, he emphasizes the weirdest words you'll never think about, like in Toast of London he says sexual, sexual, and it's how did he come up with that? That is the funniest way to say that word, and I think Matt Berry always finds that for some reason. And again, what makes that, what you're talking about, what makes that really funny when he's talking about how he was a pirate and a seafarer and all this stuff. And this is just a What We Do in the Shadows thing in general. I always love the art that shows for 2 seconds.
Yes.
And it's you can totally, and a lot of Matt Berry's ones, and I think this is just a bit with the editors and the people who make the art. It's really it's just really clearly Matt Berry's face. In old
it's
pictures.
Quite crudely painted in.
Crudely painted in. It's everyone looks like a normal old pirate, and then it's clearly Matt Berry's face. And to that point, I think, and we'll talk about what Laszlo does later. Laszlo goes to Best Buy.
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's so funny.
And it's so funny. And he's And like the whole bit at the end is him being like, I was tricked by 2 sirens tonight. It like juxtaposes the two, and it's really funny because like it also speaks to our society and how like these are the modern versions of things like that. Like people get lost in Best Buy and spend thousands of dollars, some at least. I mean, if you're a vampire, you can be like, I'm not going to pay for any of this. You know?
Yeah, which is always funny.
They do. But yeah, anything else on the Siren subplot, and then we can talk a little bit more. I want to kind of talk about the doll.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
she is a really interesting character. But before that, anything else on the Siren?
At first, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a season-long thing or if it was just going to be a couple episodes where they were doing the Laszlo-Colin pairing. But then they really decided to stretch that out all season, and we saw why in episode 9.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed that this season. I've really enjoyed that pairing because we didn't get a ton of it in the previous 2 seasons. They are like quite a natural pair comedically because like Colin's just going for it, and Laszlo, as he said in previous episodes, couldn't be fucked.
Yeah.
He just doesn't care.
I don't
like
give
he doesn't
a
care
shit.
about anything. Like when Colin was doing the Jar Jar Binks impression, which was so cringe
Yeah.
a couple episodes ago, Laszlo was like, "That's a very funny voice, Colin Robinson."
Yeah.
It's just he doesn't care, and like that's really funny. That and in that way, like they kind of can be more so friends than like any of the other vampires can with Colin Robinson, because like Laszlo's just not bothered by it.
It's genuinely a great pairing that I really didn't think about, because Laszlo is like a character who just like goes with the flow of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really interesting to see with Colin Robinson, who is supposed to be like dull and boring and like suck energy out of people, but they're both going on like these really fun adventures that like never mean anything. But like it's still like fun. Like they completely dismantled and rebuilt a car this season, and nothing happened with it. Colin Robinson caught fire this season, and like nothing really happened with it. And it's like again, the pairing have been through so much this season. The more I think about it, like literally every episode, and we like touched on that earlier, I think in episodes 1 through 3. And it's definitely purposeful. Like, and we were saying that before. Like they're probably building towards something with it. And they end up doing it. But this episode, I would say, is the last like chill moment of it. It's just like, oh yeah, this is just them having fun, going on like a little adventure. And it was a lot of fun. And it ends like perfectly with like Colin wanting to talk to the Siren more, and then Laszlo being like, I'll help you. And then I always love when Laszlo flies, because he puts his arm up, and then like it's clear that they just bring him up with like ropes and stuff. But like it's like a very classic, like it looks like he's like almost Peter Pan-esque with like how he like summons the winds to fly. It's really great. And I love when they cut back to that in a farewell in episode 9. They like just cut to him like flying off, and I'm like, that is just a really funny visual gag.
One more thing about the Colin and Laszlo pairing, and then I have 3 quick hits, and then we could go back to the A plot. But like you were saying, like, yeah, Laszlo goes with the flow, and the Colin Robinson character is designed to stop the flow.
Yes.
For everyone. And that's why they work together, is because Laszlo cannot be stopped because he doesn't care. And so and I think you see this in the performance too by Mark Prosh, he says something that's like not funny intentionally because he's like an energy vampire. He's trying to drain everybody all the time. And then Laszlo just goes with it, and then he's kind of surprised by it, but delighted also a little bit. Yeah. And that's consistent through all of this. And so they were a really good pairing, and I say were, which makes me sad. Mm-hmm. But 3 quick hits. Back at the Best Buy thing, this killed me so much. When Laszlo's sitting in the chair and he's like, "Excuse me, could you really tell a difference between 5.1 and 7.1?" And then the Best Buy worker is like, "Well, 5.1 is perfectly standard for normal homes." And Laszlo's like, oh, "Okay, but you're telling me that 7.1 is definitely better. That's what you're saying." And she says, "Well, I consider myself a bit of an audiophile, and I think you might be too, Mr. Cravensworth." Guilty as charged.
Yeah, that was great.
Killed me. Colin singing is really funny. Colin singing with the Siren, just like that high-pitched, unbearably bad singing voice. And then I love when they make use of the documentary format, which they do at the end of the episode when Laszlo's like, "All right, everyone turn off the sound because this is about like we're taking Colin out of here." And they do that throughout these 3 episodes quite a bit, actually. And I just love that. I love when they take advantage of the documentary format and make that into one of the jokes, because that always, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but it definitely works for us because we appreciate like the craft of filmmaking itself.
Yeah. Totally.
And so that just tickles me every time.
It's funny because this is a mockumentary show and I like don't like The Office that much. And I respect it for what it did, but like I feel like that format always just like it like fed off interviews and stuff, and like there were always like I can't really like there's an interview in every episode for like obviously for what we do in the shadows, but it never like feels like it takes away. It never feels like it's like the main joke of it. It's not like there's a setup and it cuts back to like Nandor being like fuck that guy or something like that, you know. It's like it's not like a weird thing like that. Whenever they use the documentary format and the interview format especially, it's like only to sprinkle in exposition. It's never to like to like give a punchline to a joke, because like the punchline comes with again the mystical stuff you're seeing on screen, like the doll
in the A plot. Shout out to Scott Bakula for being in this episode.
Oh right, yeah. Scott Bakula.
I love that they just like they've done this multiple times. They just get like an older celebrity to be on a Zoom call and then they just put him in a show. Like, like they've done this with Wesley Snipes. They did it with Scott Bakula. It's just really funny. It's like it's one of the most critically acclaimed comedies on television. So you would think that like all of these famous comedians would be guest starring constantly on the show, but instead they're getting guys like Scott Bakula to do like a very one note joke that's still very funny. It's basically just that they think he is well, as Nandor says, Count Bakula. And like it speaks to the weirdness and the sensibility of this show, that they would rather go for like a Scott Bakula joke than they would for like a, I don't know, like than having Kevin Hart guest star for an episode. You know?
And I feel like they could get Kevin Hart to guest star in an episode as like a vampire, but again, they don't do that stuff.
But then the doll leaves, and then Nandor and Nadia and Guillermo have to go out. Before they go out, though, very funny Kristen Shaw bit where she's like flirting with Guillermo and he's just not into it at all.
Yeah.
And this has kind of been a through line through the season also, like when Kristen Shaw was explaining the sexual harassment training video, and she mentions like, I stroke him off, and then Guillermo's like, no, thank you. And then in this episode, and then there's one more time also, I think, but Guillermo's just not interested, and he's like, please, let's go hunt down this doll. And so they go hunt down the doll, and it's a fun like chase episode, which is always cool because I love when they go out into the city.
Again, it was cool to just see like Nadia's like spirit go into different things and be like, oh yeah, that they can just like that's a spirit. That's like the doll is possessed by Nadia's spirit. It wasn't just always a doll. And that was just like a fun reminder. And overall, like again, it was just like a fun little A plot for Nadia. And I feel like we always talk about Nadia just being like one of the best, like all the characters are good in the show, but Nadia's like so incredible. The performance is wonderful. And it was really fun to see her like arguing with herself always. Like it's like a really interesting acting thing, I would imagine, for her to do. So yeah, overall, like I think overall I like this episode. I think it leaves a little to be desired, because again, it's just like kind of, again, I don't think we'll ever like come back to things in this episode is what I'm trying to say. Like it does feel like the middle of the season episode that's just like fun, and there's some weird stuff that happens in it.
Yeah, it's not a Hall of Fame episode, but still I had a good time watching it. And anytime Natasha Dimitriou gets to just like fluctuate between super angry and super sad, it's really funny. Like when she's yelling for the doll throughout the entire episode, she says this line or a variation of this line multiple times, but she's like, don't be so dramatic, you stupid little bitch. I love you so much. And that's just really funny. Like how much she fluctuates in emotion.
Yeah.
And it gives her the opportunity to just like really go for it. Every actor on the show gets the opportunity to go for it, but in a completely different way. Laszlo gets to be very theatrical and like do a step in and a gesture out with his hand with all of his weird lines.
Yeah.
Nandor gets to have like these long emphases on the end of sentences, like I present you with the feather of a female crow, you know?
Yeah.
And then Natasha Dimitriou just gets to like ham it up in the best way. And I mean that absolutely in the best way, the most respectful way, because it's so funny and it's really good. Again, my favorite character. So yeah, it's nice that we got to showcase her a little bit more as well. Whenever she's like the feature of an episode, I always like that episode a lot.
All right, moving on to season 3, episode 8, titled The Wellness Center. Nandor is persuaded to reject vampirism and pursue a healthier lifestyle. This was a really fun episode. Nandor gets a nice haircut in it that disappears the next episode, which is hilarious. And this was a lot of fun. I really like the idea of vampires who don't want to be vampires anymore, and it's kind of like a weird pyramid scheme. And it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of like funny extras in the background in this one. And this is like a Nandor episode. Nandor's been like really depressed all season. We see it in Gale earlier in episode 3, where like he wants to find a loved one. He doesn't feel like he belongs. And then this whole episode is him finding a place where he belongs. And I really enjoyed this episode.
This is such a good episode. This is such a good episode. The whole like Nandor leaving scene was very funny because he puts on his like old human clothes, which are like metal and chains, and like
it's like
he looks
war.
like a knight.
Yeah, it's like it's like war clothing.
Yeah, that's really funny, and him like yelling at everyone as he leaves is very funny. But then it's quite emotional, you know, like in a silly sitcom way, but like it's quite emotional when he's leaving and Guillermo begs him once more to turn him into a vampire, and he says like, I've grown some affection for you, like a little bit, but being a vampire is a curse, and so I can't do this. And great performance in that scene by Harvey Guillen, because he cried, like he had a single tear like comes down his face, and he's like really sad, and then Nandor leaves and then almost gets hit by a car, and that's really funny too.
Yeah.
So there's little buttons on every emotional moment that bring you back to laughter. But the big reveal of this episode, when you hear it's been 1 week, and then it cuts to Nandor with that haircut dancing, and he's like, I love my life here. Like, it's so funny. That might be the hardest I've laughed all season.
Yeah, same here.
That whole montage is so good.
Yeah, no, it's also really funny because like I remember like kind of liking that song for a second in my life at like a weird point.
It's a good song.
It might be a banger, but like also it's like it was perfectly timed, and it just like kept going, and there's like a nice button on it at the end when like Guillermo's like, you're not human, and he goes like, well, if I'm not human, how can I do this? And then he's like, he just sings the whole song to him.
It's been 1 week. It's like so like
so like not
it's so
on
truncated.
Like, yeah. It's so like not in the rhythm too. It's like just a faster rhythm, and it's hilarious. I mean, I absolutely love that montage. I think that's the best montage maybe of the series. I say maybe because that Jackie Daytona episode has some really good montages too. And you just can't compete with that episode. But I will say, I think the Wellness Center this is my bold statement for the pod this week.
Oh.
The Wellness Center is Nandor's Jackie Daytona episode. Yeah,
I 100% agree with you. I'm on this boat with you.
I think this Jackie Daytona episode is still better, I will say, because I like Laszlo. I think Laszlo's, you say Nadja's your favorite character. I think Laszlo's my favorite character.
Right.
But that doesn't take anything away from Nandor, because I think he's brilliant. And Kayvon Novak does such a good job in this episode. And also the woman who plays the lead vampire of this like cult / like yoga studio. Just some really funny part. And then that montage ends with a really nice button where she's just like, we're fucking.
Yeah. I mean, let's just break down that montage real quick, because it's a laugh a second. It's not just Kayvon Novak's like vocal delivery, because the way he says like I would have been ridiculed for saying things like, I'm a number 2, but like here a number 2 is very respected. Like that is just in that, like his vocal delivery is hilarious, because like he is like becoming zombified, and you can feel that like in the way he's delivering the lines. Not only is that funny, but then also the way he looks, the dancing, that song, the hula hoop bit in the mirror. You talked about this last time, how you love mirror bits, and that was a really good mirror bit, which comes back later at the end of the episode in like an action sequence.
Can I say something?
And like
though?
taking. Yeah, go for it.
I saw it coming this time. I was like, oh, they're going to do the mirror bit again. But earlier this season, I didn't at all, and I forgot about it. But again, it's like good setup and punch, because it's like, oh, it's just another punchline to the joke that we set up they set up in episode, was it 2? Yeah, all the way in episode 2. Continue though, Dan.
And then they also take out like their teeth every night. And when they take out Nandor's teeth, and he's like... he's so excited about it. He's like, we have to do it every night because they grow back in the morning, but she's working on a way to make it permanent. And everyone's like, yeah.
Just like with a bloody mouth. It's like,
yeah.
And the juxtaposition is so funny.
The whole thing is, like you said, it is very Jackie Daytona-esque. It's a character that's falling in love with this other non-vampire community, this human, quote unquote, community. Yeah. And just like really digging in and like learning the lifestyle. It is very Jackie Daytona-esque.
And I will say it's in the way that the character would do it. Nandor would fully like commit to it and love them. Like in the Jackie Daytona episode, it's like, you're like, why is Laszlo into this? And it's because like Laszlo doesn't give a fuck. So he's just kind of enjoying the plight of this like small town, because he just like has lived so many lives to this point that he's just a regular human bartender now, and that's just his thing. Like again, if this show could go on for like hundreds of years, in like season 400, he'd be like, I was a human barkeep in like 2017, and like he would just say that, and it would just like call back to that. And like if we could go far enough, like Laszlo just like lives many lives, but like Nandor is like someone who like really tries to take everything with like so much weight. And that's why he would fall for like a cult or like something that isn't real, but he like so desperately wants it to be real, because he like can't look himself in the mirror, you know?
Oh, I'm proud of you. That was good.
Thank you.
I think that's a very good point. I think, these writers really do know their characters, and that's the casting is 1A, and then how well the writers know the characters is 1B for why this is such a great show. Because like it never fails. There's never been an episode where I'm like, I don't know. Like we talked about how we don't love the werewolf stuff. We didn't love Gale that much, but like even that, it's like it's still within these characters, and the performances are still great. So in this episode, like you said, he falls for a cult, and this is the most explicit metaphor of the season about how like wellness living is sort of like a cult, and in many ways very true. You know, you can totally get sucked into it the same way that you would in a religious cult. And I love the way that like all of the extras they're zombified, but not in like a slow Romero walking zombie way, but in just like they all have the same quick twitchy motions, and they all smile like totally insane people. Yeah. And there's that one part of the montage also when like it's on security camera footage, and there's one scene where like everyone's bouncing around on the yoga balls, and they're just like they just look like stupid children just bouncing around. Like they're not doing yoga, they're not actually doing anything, because they aren't human. They think that they are. Like when they're chopping the broccoli too, and they just throw it in the trash. Yeah, and then there was just a lot of things in the montage. I'm just remembering it now, where like she's just explaining like small talk and being like, "How are you today?" And it's like, if you're like, these are the only things you can say. It's like, I'm doing fine. Like it's just like boring like human talk, and it's just really funny to like hold it to this level of like everyone like wants to be a human here, because like again, vampirism is a curse, like Nandor says earlier, and like that again, you touched on it beautifully, but like that scene is wonderful between him and Guillermo, because like that is the conceit. That is how they can always get out of never making Guillermo a vampire. Yeah, is because it is a curse, and like Nandor wouldn't want to put that on his like really close friend, his best friend, maybe more. Who knows? Maybe more. But yeah, and let's not forget that is the show, because that is how the show starts. The show starts with Guillermo waking up Nandor, and it's it's the show is about those two.
Yes.
It's about all of them because it is like an ensemble piece, but like
But, like,
those
the heart
two
of the
are the
show,
show. Yeah.
And then when Guillermo goes back for him, that is a really great sequence. And we'll talk about that right now. It's really funny. It's really funny when he's like, he's like putting crosses and he's like, I'm just going to go save like Nandor, and you never know what's going to happen. And again, it's like this fun thing where like we know how fucking great Guillermo is with like killing vampires. So like this scene is like building up in anticipation. And it's really funny how he just starts it off being like, oh, I can like get over them on this one. Like, I know like what's up here. So he walks in, he's like, oh, this is just like my favorite. He's like playing the part. He's like, this is just like where I work out, Nandor. And then he's like, what?
It's funny that we haven't seen each other before.
Yeah, exactly. Like he always comes to these things, but like Nandor just hasn't seen him yet. And then he puts his bag like way far away from him. And I'm like, okay, this is actually going to like reverse the bit I thought it was going to be. I thought he was just going to come in and kill everyone. But it's really nice when he gets in there and then they all start doing like their normal routine. And then Guillermo's just like not at all like following it at all, and it's like stop. And then there's like a big action sequence where he saves Nandor. And then I think the hardest I laugh is like different than like my favorite, like the bit I appreciate the most. And the bit I appreciated the most in this episode was when they were doing the action sequence. Guillermo keeps hitting people and then Nandor keeps saying their names. So like it's just like it's like such a little thing, but it's like he hits an extra and he's like, Jerry, no. Like it just adds to
that was Steve.
Yeah, that was Steve. Like Eve. Like it's just really funny. Also, just random fact that I learned last night. Do you know that Steve Jobs's like last daughter, who's like our age, her name is Eve Jobs?
That's insane.
Yeah, sorry. I just needed to say that.
We're keeping it in.
We're keeping it in. I learned that last night at a thing. Because someone's like, I think her name's Sophia Jobs. And I looked at it, I'm like, no, it's Eve Jobs.
That's wild.
Yeah, as I was, though. And that bit is like really, again, it's a fun, like, you know, whenever you see Guillermo's action sequences, it's also really funny. Like, we haven't talked about them because, like, again, season 2 ends with him killing so many vampires.
Right.
And he really hasn't done that this season. He did it a little in episode 1, or he almost kills Christian Shaw, and she's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I'm here. Yeah. I just have a message for you guys.
I sent ravens.
Yeah. They're all dead. But it's a really fun sequence. Again, it's not like Guillermo's like best sequence, I think, but it starts off pretty hot with like the holy water, and then like him again, that hula hoop bit is really good in the mirror where like you see it start and then you just see like the ending of it, but like you don't see the vampire because you can't see the vampire's reflection. And then again, you know, Guillermo gets out of it, and then he drives away, and then there's like a nice little sequence where like Guillermo's like, you're brainwashed, and we'll talk about it a little more in the next episode, because I don't think Nandor was actually ever brainwashed and thought he could not, like, he could become human. I think he was just doing it because he needed something to aspire towards, and that was just like the thing that like gave him the most joy at the time. In my opinion. But yeah, it was a fun sequence. And then, it ends interestingly. Anything else? Anything on that sequence, Dan?
Again, talking about how like it's always fun when they take advantage of the fact that this is a documentary and that there are real people behind the cameras. When they do escape, they have to make like a exchange. Like the camera crew gets in the car behind them instead of just magically being in the car with them. You know, There wasn't just a guy set up in the car. They had to get in another car, chase them down. Once they stop, then they get out, then they move in front. And I just like that. I like knowing that there are people behind the camera. And they did this. I think the best example of this is in season 1 when the Baron like kills one of the camera or the sound guy. And then they're like, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah. We will try to do better. Again, Guillermo's smart. Guillermo is much more smart than everyone wants to give him credit for, because he anticipates that Nandor's still gonna want to go back, and so he has the seatbelt installed with like, what was it, silver or something?
Silver, yeah. And so, very clever.
Very, very clever. And then he takes him back, and guess what? we're right back to where we started at the beginning of the season, but in reverse order now.
Yes.
Because Guillermo was in the cage and now Nandor is in the cage, which is just great. Classic television writing. Really just snaps for that.
Yeah, for real.
This could be a Hall of Fame episode, I think.
No,
I don't know how big the Hall of Fame is, but like,
well, Jackie Daytona is definitely
Jackie Daytona is number one. Jackie Daytona is the number one. That is the goat of goats. That is the Michael Jordan of what we do in the shadows.
Like, what an episode that is. And how it starts too. Well, sorry, we won't dive into it, but like, wow, that episode is just so fucking funny. Yeah, and the episode ends with the cult kind of like being taken back to stage one. So like, who knows? Maybe she'll come back, maybe she won't. But yeah, she's just like, go on the roof and like become human, and they all just like burn to death, and like that's it. And she's just like back to the drawing board. So we'll see if she ever returns. And like, I think in general, like, it's always fun to have characters like this who could return at any moment.
Yeah, this is the one show where loose ends are good, because then you can always come back to them. Exactly. Like, we can always come back to Nick Kroll again.
And I was about to say, I don't think he's going to be in this season.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
We'll get him next year. He would have. Yeah, I think he would have been in one of these episodes, but I don't think he's going to be in the finale, because I think there's other things they have to do in the finale. But yeah, the Wellness Center, very good episode, a lot of fun. And again, the Jackie Daytona of this season, I'd say, just because it's Nandor's. So I'd be interested to see if we ever get, I guess the only other person who could get an episode like that at this point would be Nadja. So, and so let's talk about a farewell. So this is the most recent episode. It aired October 21st. And the description to a farewell is: Colin has a birthday and a vampire says goodbye. So it's really funny that they open with Nandor in the cage and his hair is just back to normal. Like, yeah, he's like wearing the same outfit he did last episode, but his hair's like long again. Which like, I just love that. And again, it's like you said, it's a nice like switch from the first episode of the season when Guillermo was in there. But now Nandor's in there, and there's no way Nandor can get out. Cause he's not as smart as Guillermo was. But anyways, he, eventually they let him out, and he's like, I'm just going to go to sleep for a really long time. Is it called like a super slumber or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a 100 to 500 year like time where just like a vampire just goes into hibernation. And then he basically like leaves, and the whole bit with Nandor this episode is just they keep just waking him up because they need his help. And then Colin Robinson is having his 100th birthday party, which is like a big thing. And Laszlo seems like very like focused on getting it done. And he finds it important. And then Kristen Shaw comes in, and she's like, oh, some of the Vampiric Council is like coming over for a dinner and wants to like check up on everyone. And we get some fun cameos through that for sure. But that's the first time they're like, well, we need Nandor, because Nandor's like the co-leader with me. And then they wake him up, and he's like, how long has it been? Like, Guillermo, you don't look good. And he's like, It's been 20 minutes. I look the same. But also, I guess before they send him off, there is a really sweet moment with Nandor and Guillermo, and Nandor's just like, calm down. Like, I'll be back in 100 years and you'll be fine. And he's like, no, I'll be 130 and I'm going to definitely be dead. And then he goes like, well, like, if you're like negative like that, like, then sure. Like, just cause again, it's really funny how like, I don't think they would take the time to think about like humans' lifespans. Like, they would, again, they've lived for hundreds of years. Like, it's just like a thing, like 100 years is nothing to them. It's like a decade, pretty much. And yeah, it's really interesting. And then I don't know. Yeah. There's just like a lot in this episode, and I'm sure we'll touch on all of it. I want to save the Colin Robinson for later. But yeah, let's talk about let's see, where should we start with this episode? I think we should just start with like the vampiric dinner, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, we get like fun cameos this episode. From one of our favorite comedic actors, David Cross. David Cross is in this episode as like an old Jewish, clearly Jewish, an old Jewish vampire who has like a girlfriend named Coco who's human. That's a really funny bit when Guillermo's like, I have chicken nuggies and spaghetti with butter on it. And then she's like, oh my God.
And she's like, I need to know the name of your chef. Yeah. Because at first it's Candy Alexander who comes out and it's like, oh, cool. Cool. And then after that, it's David Cross and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And then it's Donald Logue. And it's like, wait, what? What? Like, what's going on here? Like, Donald Logue is such a great actor. And like, just like, again, not a person that would cameo in a TV comedy about vampire roommates. That's what separates the show with its casting. They make weird, strange choices like that. And also, shout out to Donald Logue, because I think he actually really gives a really good performance in this episode. It's not just like a take the cash, show up on the show kind of cameo. It's like he really goes for it, and he like actually like he gets it. Like, he understands it. You can tell that whether he was a fan or not, he like understood what it was that he was doing there, and like it wasn't just a paycheck job. He went there and he performed. He is an actor, and he did his job.
Yeah, when he eats like the waiter, it's so funny. And like, again, it's like, oh, he gets it. He knows what's up. Yeah. And also, it's really funny because he was in Blade. And it's just funny that they just keep referencing that Blade does exist in this universe.
Yeah,
like, it's
they
not
love Blade.
Yeah. So like, everyone who is in the movie Blade will only play themselves. I really do like that idea of it. And it was a fun turnaround, because you thought it was just going to be Donald Logue, but like, the joke is that like, yes, it's him, but like, also he's a vampire. Like, he's actually just a vampire, which is funny. And again, I think it shows that like, he has looked the same for the last like 20 years. Really fun cameos in this one. I wanted more of David Cross almost. I feel like he didn't really. Me too. He had like kind of like a funny character, but like, his biggest bit is like when he's like tugging on like Nandor's dick. And again, it's like, I don't know. I again, whenever David Cross is cameos in a show, you always want him to be like again, I think his episode in Community season 6 is like season 5 is like a good example of that. He has like, you like want more out of him because he's such like a gifted sitcom actor, and like Tobias Funke is maybe the best character ever to be put on a sitcom.
Hall of Famer for sure.
It's ironic.
First ballot.
Yeah. And it's ironic that like, because that's not David Cross's humor at all. Tobias is like a stretch for him. Like, Tobias is like such like an interesting part. And the reason I think I'm always disappointed isn't the right word, but like, we'll just use it for now, when David Cross comes on a show, is because it's just a different kind of humor than his best character. And that's like a really interesting idea, because like, typically when someone like when Kevin Hart does, we've brought up Kevin Hart a couple of times in the podcast.
Yeah.
I saw him a couple of weeks ago live. Really interesting.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, my friend was on a show with him. I was like, what the fuck?
Nice.
Crazy. But you know, when you get Kevin Hart in something, like, he always is the same character. Because that is like his best character, so to speak. But when David Cross is on something, he's never his best character, because his best character isn't actually him. Like he should have won like so many Emmys for Tobias Funke, because like, he's just such a different comedic actor than that show represents him as. So again, whenever he like riffs a bit, it's like very different than Tobias Funke. It's like Tobias is like very, very theatrical, but like his more humor is just like, again, it was kind of this, and where he's like, you know, I heard like it's, the width is pretty good, but the girth is, you know, when he's talking about Nandor's penis, it's like very like slow building and like kind of like funny because of the awkwardness of it. And again, like it's I guess I'm also just disappointed because he comes in so hot with that costume. That costume is insane.
Yes.
He has like again, he kind of looks like the guy from Queen's Gambit. Like, he has like huge hair and like a big beard. And again, like a funny concept with Coco, and like Guillermo being like, he's never gonna die. Like
Right.
Like you're never gonna get his money. It's just like a really funny concept. But sorry, I kind of went on a David Cross rant there. But he did do really good in it, and it was like fun. It was just almost like he just got forgotten about just because there's so many other things happening in this episode.
Right. It almost feels like a wasted cameo because he's not even like the primary cameo of the episode.
Yeah, exactly.
like Donald Logue really takes over, and which is again speaking to the quality of this show, that they're like, we have one of the funniest sitcom actors in the history of television. Let's go to Donald Logue instead. Like let's go to him off the bench
as Donald Logue.
Right, as Donald Logue, but as a vampire. Yeah. I agree. I think everything you said about David Cross is really, really smart. I think that you're right, that this is more in line with his sense of humor. It's slower, it's more intelligent. If you have ever listened to him do an interview, he's more like that than he is Tobias Funke, and his stand-up is also is completely different as well.
Yeah, can I tell you one of my favorite bits by him?
Please.
He goes, I got in a fight at Thanksgiving this year. And, when you're like fighting with your mom and your siblings and stuff, you always like learn something new about your family that you didn't know before. Like this Thanksgiving, like I learned my mom can't take a punch.
That's a really good joke. That's a great joke.
Yeah, just a really good joke. And again, that is like David Cross's sense of humor. And there's it's kind of like slow building and like gets to a point. And this is just comedy in general. It just takes a left turn when you think it's going to go right. But again, it's similar in this episode.
Yeah. And I would have liked to have had a solo episode for him where he could be on that rhythm and the show could be on that rhythm with him.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where the disconnect is like the show is in this episode not on his rhythm, and so it kind of feels out of tempo or not on time. But still, to have him in the show, like I was just saying, having loose ends on the show is a great thing because he's just in the world now, and so if they ever want to go back to him, they can.
Yeah, and I think it's something they do really nicely with like Candy Alexander and like with Donald Logue and like David Cross. They just keep adding like vampiric council members. And also, let's not forget Dave Bautista is also in this universe. Like
yes.
But like as not as a vampiric council member, as just like a vampire who's in jail. I like always forget that he's in that.
I love the cameos. I love it anytime they have a celebration, anytime they have a dinner party, anytime that they are welcoming guests into their home. It's always fun because they're just so inept and they're so bad at it.
And then I think one of the funniest bits too is just like there's all this stuff happening with the Vampire Council just for like Laszlo to be like, and it's Colin Robinson's 100th birthday. And then not just like, shut the fuck up. Like, come on. And then when when they all go to like a blood bank or whatever, like they're gonna all drink blood and then just like probably have an orgy and then go to bed. Colin Robinson's like, my tummy kind of hurts, so I think I'm gonna like leave. And then Laszlo reveals what's been going on this whole season, and I do remember that weird part where he like rips out a page of the book. Yes. I like distinctly, like, I think we even talked about it in the first 3 episodes where you're like, yeah, he just like doesn't care and like rips out a page of a book. But he does that because it does say that energy vampires die on their 100th birthday. And then it also is like really funny for that one scene where Laszlo's in the background and then Colin Robinson's all like, what are you reading back there? And he's like, pornography. And you're like, that's a lazy bit, but it's like him stalling, it's him being like,
I'll wank my way, you wank yours.
Yeah. I always thought that line was so weird. I'm like, oh, weird.
Yeah. It completely stood out the first time that you hear it, but then now knowing the context, it's like, oh, it was all planned. It was an intentionally poorly delivered line. And that makes it just like, it kind of hits you. It hits you in the gut.
And you're like, oh shit. And then again, it goes through a nice little montage where he's like, I don't understand Colin Robinson, but like he's taken my heart. And it's like a really sweet like speech he says. And then when he's talking afterwards, it's just like, I've just been trying to give the old chap like the best experiences this whole season. And then it's like a really sweet montage. It almost brings a tear to your eye because you're like, oh my God, like Laszlo's actually been doing something this whole season. He's been like trying to make Colin Robinson's like last moments on this earth like really sweet and wonderful. And I think that it also reminded me of that SpongeBob episode where Squidward thinks SpongeBob eats a pie with a bomb in it and he thinks he's going to explode.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought about when he was explaining this. And it's like done in like a really, it's like that done in a really interesting way. Because again, like you can't kill SpongeBob off, but like, I think they might've just killed Colin Robinson off. And let's talk about that. They go down below. Colin is like literally like pooping his guts out. Which is again, it like balances the funny with the emotional. And I think one of the funniest bits in that was like Colin Robinson's been farting for like 4 minutes and then like he farts and then like Matt or Laszlo like looks behind Guillermo like he farted and then Guillermo's like, no, what? Like I didn't, like it's clearly Colin Robinson. He's been farting this whole time. And then, and then he's just like, well, get some ginger beer for Colin Robinson, like you fucking asked. And again, there's a lot of nice balance there. And then it's a really sweet thing where like Guillermo goes to get the ginger beer, but instead he like wakes up Nandor one last time and he's like, hey, Colin Robinson's dying. Like we should all say goodbye. And then they come back and then obviously it's like clearly a dummy, but the crazy part about it does look like a dead body. Like if you've ever seen a dead body, I've seen a few, not that I've killed anyone, but just because like my grandparents die and like I see them when they're dead and it's like weird. But again, there's just like a certain loss of like, for lack of a better term, it's like a loss of a soul. It's just like, it's just a body up until this point, you know, it's not like anything else. It's a corpse. And like that legitimately like looks like a corpse. So like great job on the props department. Cause I was like, oh, that's actually like it's either really good makeup or like a really good body double. And it's clearly a body double because Nandor's like, wake up, Colin Robinson. And then he just like puts his entire hand through his face. And that's when you go, oh, Colin Robinson might actually be dead now. It is just kind of shocking. It's a shocking like end because like, again, that balances the humor well too. Cause it's like, oh, we just blew up one of our favorite characters' faces. One of our main characters' faces just is not there anymore. And again, we'll see if it actually sticks like that. If Colin Robinson's actually gone, I do think it will be a detriment to the show because I think he adds so much to the show. But also it's like, we asked this question all season, like, what does this show want to be?
Right.
And if it's only going to go for 2 more seasons, I think this is the right time to kill off Colin Robinson.
I was in disbelief the entire time. When Laszlo first reveals that energy vampires die at what it says in the book, it says approximately 100 years. I thought the joke was going to be like, I thought he was just going to have a big fart or poop his pants or something. And then like, he'd be like, I feel better now. And then the joke being like, oh, it's just an approximation. Like he could live for another 15 years. Who knows? Yeah. But no. And just going back to that reveal also, like it justifies so much of what we were talking about this season about how like, are those two like having to quarantine together? Is like Matt Berry not able to come to Toronto to film a lot of stuff? Like they're only filming on one set basically, which is this library set.
And that could all be true.
Right. That still probably is true, but they created a very smart reason for it within the context of the show, and that is that he has been researching not pornography, probably also pornography,
yes, definitely, but pornography,
more importantly energy vampire stuff. And like he has been, that's one of the funny things of the Siren too, is like at the end of the episode when he's like, I'm sorry we didn't get to the island to reveal the nature of your vampire origins. He's been pursuing this with Colin this whole time. And so he's you know, he gives off the impression that he couldn't be fucked, but he's been really caring this whole season, which is really sweet. And then once Colin is dying and Nandor comes into the room and it's too late, I was like, okay, here we go. Classic, like wake up from death bit where like he rises and like farts or something. I was just waiting for like that button.
Or
but
he
then
becomes
Nandor,
something else, like there's like a cocoon or something, and he becomes like, he has like a full head of hair, like that one episode in season 1 where he gains all the power.
Yeah, he's got a huge head. But then Nandor puts his hand through his face, and I was like, I gasped, because one, when they go for the gore, they go for the gore.
Yeah.
Again, credit to FX just as a network, because like they allow them to swear and curse as much as they want. They allow them to go for the blood and the gore when they knock that dude's head off in the ring in the casino, like shocking. And in this episode, they just crush through the main character's face.
I mean, our only weekly reviews, I realized, have been FX shows, because
they still make weekly water cooler television shows, and that's why FX is such a good show, or a network.
Yeah, we're wrapping up here, but like I will be interested to see. I think this will truly like show like what the series is going forward in the next episode. If Colin Robinson's dead, this show has like 1 or 2 seasons left, like 100%. They have an end game. They've always had an end game. But if Colin Robinson is alive, if it's just like a left turn, a surprise, like, oh no, he's not dead, then I think maybe the show can go for like maybe 10 seasons. We'll see. But I definitely think that the next episode will be very telling. And the next episode is entitled The Portrait. And it says, the housemates grieve the loss of one of their own, which, when we read that early on, or when I read that earlier on, I was like, like, I'm interested to see like if they actually kill someone off, or it's just like they're mourning the loss of like a random vampire, like Nick Kroll's vampire just dies or something.
Right.
Which, who knows, maybe he'll be in next episode. We'll see. But I'm really excited for this finale. The last 2 episodes of this little pack that we did, A Farewell and The Wellness Center, are really wonderful. I think, Colin Robinson is just like a great character, and I kind of hope he'll come back, but honestly, I'm kind of leaning more towards that he's dead. This is like it. If they're holding this out for a week, it would be kind of annoying to be like, just kidding. Like I think this was very solemn end to a great character, and he's had a great season. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's had a couple episodes by himself with like the Vanessa Bayer episode and a few others. But yeah, just a wonderful performance, and sad to see him maybe go.
I have 2 final thoughts here. One, I hope episode 10 is I hope that's kind of our Colin solo episode, where, because again, we're doing a documentary format, so we can go backwards in time to other things that they've recorded, I hope that they're grieving his loss, and then we get to have a bunch of Colin Robinson stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope that they decide to make the finale about a central character of the show and giving him a proper goodbye, if they do decide to go down that route.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping for with this last episode is a Colin-centric episode, whether he comes back to life or not. But like you said, big turning point moment for the show, big identity defining moment for the show. And then my last thought, whether he comes back or not, if he is dead, if he's gone, I'd like to just quote the great Colin Robinson and say, vampire roommates are forever.
Yeah. Vampire roommates are forever. That's great, Dan. That's great. And on that one, this has been the What We Do in the Shadows, Nothing Notable podcast. We'll be back. Honestly, we'll probably do like an emergency episode, like just when it airs, and then we'll get it up. Hopefully, maybe we'll get it up Friday, but I know like we're all really busy as people, so we'll see what time we can get it up. But yeah, it's been a great season, and I think it's really interesting to see where it started and where season 2 ended and how we're about to end now. And we'll talk about that more next episode. But till then, vampire roommates are forever.